Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and welcome to the Daily Friend Wrap. My power has just gone off. I'm joined by Mr. Michael Morris. And let's get into the news of the day. So the first bit is that I think were made quite recently, but there's been more comments about those comments. And this is Sanef, the National Editors Forum, has slammed Gauteng Human Settlements and Infrastructure Development, MEC Lebogang Maile's what they called arrogance. The audio came out of some comments he had made to a News 24 journalist who was investigating his connections to some financial dealing relating to Paul Mashatile. So Maile, when he was being asked by this journalist various questions about how these finances and how they worked and a report, he lost his temper and shouted that the journalist was, quote, a stupid racist white man, told him to shut up. And then the conversation continued. And at one point he said, no, shut up. I tell you, I had appointed the GPF to deal with this thing. Stop harassing me. Once they give me the report, I will effing give you the report. The South African National Editors Forum said journalists have the right to ask questions, especially when public funds are involved. As a public official, Maile demonstrated arrogance and behavior which brought the entire institution of government into disrepute. Michael, it's always kind of interesting when you have a senior politician like this lose their temper. I mean, on one hand, I kind of get it. It's not nice to sort of be asked difficult questions, while presumably you're relaxing at home. But on the other hand, this is a bit suspicious, isn't it?
It is. It is. I must first of all acknowledge your singular propriety in shortening the expletive there. But I would highly recommend viewers and listeners, if they haven't listened to this, do log into News 24 and listen to the audio clip. It's quite astonishing, and quite clearly, as you say, Nick. Public officials are there to respond to public queries. They're to be accountable. This is what we expect. He's an MEC, for heaven's sake. This is not some party parachick low down the line who's perhaps completely unaccustomed to confronting difficult questions, and it is simply unacceptable. Quite extraordinary performance, and it does immediately raise questions about whether he has something to hide. This kind of behavior invariably is a sort of indication of a sensitivity, a sensitive spot that's being probed, and he doesn't want it touched. I think News 24 has done very well to draw attention to this and to put them on the spot, as indeed is true for the South African National Editors Forum, Sanef. I think very good for them to speak out to.
No, I definitely agree with that. But I think the most important person to speak out would be someone like the Gauteng Premier, Pazial Zola Sufi, and say, look, regardless of whether we think these journalists' questions are founded or unfounded, you shouldn't really talk to journalists this way. You shouldn't talk to the public in general this way. But especially not when someone's asking you, because it does. I agree. It demonstrates a sort of a contempt of, you're just like an annoying fly. Go away. Why do I have to answer to you? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I think it can be placed to make fun of, to push back a little bit when the journalist is getting up in your business. And that's part of the rumble and tussle of political dialogue. But this is really just beyond the pale.
Yeah. I mean, you could accuse him of all sorts of things, but to bring his race into it is just that's totally unacceptable.
Oh yes, exactly.
Especially now.
That's a way that you're being very defensive. I think. Yeah.
And it's completely gratuitous. Has nothing whatever to do with the issue or with the journalist, and shouldn't matter in any sense what color they happen to be. Yeah. So. Quite a shocker.
Exactly. All right. Let's move on to the next story. Happening right now in Johannesburg, not too far from where I'm sitting currently, although far enough that I don't have to deal with any of it, thank goodness, is the 15th BRICS summit. So that's Brazil, India, Russia, China, South Africa. It's this kind of strange I'm not sure really what to describe it as, a geopolitical interest group, a economic cooperation forum, the foundation for maybe a potential alliance. Some people sometimes call it, a rival to the G7, I think is what President of China Xi Jinping described in his remarks today at BRICS. But some sort of interesting things have been going on around South Africa and its relationship to BRICS. So while Ramaphosa has been very happy to welcome all the BRICS leaders to South Africa and host them here, in the lead up to this, relations with the US got very tense after the American ambassador accused South Africa of giving weapons, or at least some kind of military aid, to Russia on a ship called the Lady R. And what followed that was a flurry of diplomatic activity. According to some people, that this is the most engagement the South African and American governments have had in the last decade. The last 6 months have seen envoys going between the US and South Africa. Ramaphosa and Joe Biden met in Washington, D.C. Secretary of State and Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen and Antony Blinken met with their counterparts in South Africa. And it seems as though Ramaphosa, when he spoke to the nation on Sunday about the BRICS summit, was going to great lengths to make sure that while South Africa was very happy to be part of BRICS, it definitely wasn't picking a side in the global conflict between the US and China, or the US and Russia. He said, "We will not be drawn into a contest between global powers. We have resisted pressure to align ourselves with any one of the global powers or with the influential blocs of nations. During the Cold War, the stability and sovereignty of many African countries were undermined because of their alignment with major powers. This experience has convinced us of the need to seek strategic partnerships with other countries rather than be dominated by any one country." And I think that this is a bit of a sea change, because before all of this happened, I got very much the impression that South Africa was leaning towards the Russia-China bloc. We did military exercises with them. There's, of course, the American ambassador's accusations, which I don't think have been entirely dealt with yet. Michael, what do you make of all this?
A number of quite complex issues, I think, behind all this, but I think you've touched on the key ones. It does seem almost wishful thinking for a country like South Africa to want to have this sort of standing above everything approach, that we're completely neutral and we're not going to be involved, when in fact we are involved. We are compelled to indicate where we stand, to kind of choose what really matters, and it's very difficult, I think, for any intelligent person to find in the relationship with BRICS anything that's as meaningful as South Africa's relationship with the West and America. It's just one of those things, and I think we certainly are seeing perhaps a measure of anxiety, certainly, maybe pragmatism. We're not quite sure what's motivating it, but certainly there must be some anxiety about the perceptions of where South Africa is standing. He wouldn't have made these statements, I think, if there wasn't this sense of risk. And of course, with elections coming up, we were chatting before the show, an important one for the ANC, perhaps its most important ever. Ramaphosa must be certainly conscious of the risks of making the wrong move at the wrong time on the international stage, and this possibly coming at great cost to his own people and his own party.
Right. The fear has been that we'll be excluded from the African Growth and Opportunity Act agreement, which they're all called AGOA, which is this agreement where the US basically allows certain goods to be imported into the US without tariffs from African countries. And for a long time, there's been a caucus in the US that believes that South Africa's economy is actually too developed and shouldn't be given, the sort of positive, the advantages that some of the poorer African countries get from AGOA. And clearly that Ramaphosa felt at one stage, and I think as our CEO John Indris has written, the threat to AGOA does seem to be receding now. But I think at one stage there was very genuinely a fear from Ramaphosa that AGOA might be cancelled, or at least South Africa might be excluded from it, and that wouldn't be great right before an election when you suddenly have potentially tens of thousands of jobs on the line because of a completely avoidable government policy decision. Attitude.
Exactly.
Okay. Just also, while China is our largest trading partner as an individual country. If you take, like, for example, the EU together and then add the United States, they dwarf our trade with China and India and the BRICS countries. So as you say, Michael, we're still very much integrated into that kind of world of trade. Last story for today, very quickly. It's a very tragic one, but it's just sort of like, when I read this, I just sort of put my hand in my face. Transnet, we've talked a lot about its problems on this show, and man, it's just got another one. Transnet, on its route to Richards Bay from coal mines to export coal out of the country, it passes through about more than 20 kilometers of private game reserve. And apparently the trains have been running over the wildlife. They recently killed at least 3 rhinos and possibly a 4th, a giraffe, wildebeest, impala, just carnage, just tearing through all sorts of animals. It's just really awful. And the reason for this is because 10 years ago, Transnet apparently agreed with the game reserve owners that they were going to limit their speed to around 40 kilometers an hour while passing through the game reserve, rather than the usual sort of 70, 80. Apparently, that agreement broke down for unknown reasons in the past couple of months, and the drivers have begun speeding through the game reserve again. So to me, it suggests that the management of Transnet, unsurprisingly, is just not very good. What do you make of this, Michael?
Yeah, horrifying. I mean, it is a truly horrifying story. We had all this anxiety about poaching, enormous investment in anti-poaching measures, policing, rangers developing strategies, and so on. And here we have our national rail service, as you say, plying through the wildlife. I mean, just last Friday alone, there's a story in Daily Maverick by Tony Carney. Last Friday alone, the deaths included 2 rhinos, a giraffe, a wildebeest, and several impalas. I mean, this is like a Victorian hunting exercise. It's just unheard of to have this kind of toll. So yes, it is extraordinary. We all want Transnet to hurry up and get moving and do sensible things, but here we really want them to actually just slow down and just not knock wildlife over on the tracks.
Yeah, no, it's just simple sort of, I mean, never mind all the other issues. It's the property of those private game reserves, these animals. And just having trains plowing through them is costing them money, and I'm sure it's going to hurt the local tourism industry. So clearly, this is just another sign that Transnet needs some serious management, because this is the kind of thing that a proper manager should be able to say to their drivers: "Look, guys, just don't speed through the game reserve." It's not even that much of the route; it's only about 20 k's. So presumably won't slow them down too much. And if the difference between Transnet making a loss or a profit is them being able to race through a game reserve, then you're already in such a bad situation that you need to reassess fundamentally.
That's a problem. Indeed.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today. We hope that you found our show interesting. We will see you again tomorrow. And that's a wrap.